The Watership Down podcast is intended for listeners who are familiar with the plot. There definitely will be spoilers. This episode is scripted, narrated, recorded and edited by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down Podcast episode 203, in which we will be beginning to look at the portrayal of Hazel in the original 1972 novel of Watership Down. I have decided that I will be looking at Hazel over 4 episodes, as there is so much material to cover. So in this episode we will be looking at his portrayal in the first half of the 1972 novel. Being the main character throughout all portrayals of Watership Down, he was always, I suppose, going to be the one who would take the longest to analyse, and I want to try and avoid any more near hour-long episodes of this podcast. Anyway, let's meet a leader in the making. Hazel, the Chief Clessie. The third category of the Indo-European trifunctional hypothesis, and perhaps the most mundane, is the commoner. This, in human society, consists of the farmers, the merchants, the manufacturers, and also, of course, in any patriarchal society, the women. In other words, that majority of any population who actually drive the economy, who produce the food, who raise the children, who make the goods, upon whom the warriors and priests are utterly dependent in any human economy. In the rabbit economy, of course, they would offer little more than the digging of burrows in a warren and raising of kittens, both very important, of course. Food is not farmed, just foraged by individuals, and there are no possessions as such. In theory, at least, a rabbit warren in our real world therefore exists in a state of egalitarian primitive communism, as described by Karl Marx. But in Watership Down, we know that warrens are often not egalitarian, that there are chief rabbits and owslers, and sometimes even owslaffers. At least 2 of the 4 warrens we encounter in the book are more like the authoritarian idea of communism or fascism that we discussed in the episodes on Ephrafa. One, Sandalford, being on the milder end of that scale, while Ephrafa is very much on the other extreme. The Warren of the Snares, while seeming egalitarian, clearly does have effectively a chief rabbit in the form of Cowslip, but it is a fool's paradise, led by a fanatic, corrupted by malign human influence, and crippled by fear of the shining wires. So it may be fair to say that the authoritarian model, to a greater or lesser degree, is the norm in the lapine world of Richard Adams. And the further relatively unknown Warren of Thiniel that we encounter in Tales from Watership Down does not do much to alter this perception. It seems fair to conclude, then, that the standard model for the rise of a new chief rabbit in an established warren might be rather like that experienced in a human one-party state, beginning with acceptance into the owsler, then rising through the ranks, either official or unofficial, until ending up in a position to take over on the death of the old chief. But there is another model that we experience in detail in Watership Down. That of a group of rabbits who leave a large warren to found another one elsewhere, either with the approval of the chief rabbit, as happens twice in Tales from Watership Down, or the other way. Hazel's way. Perhaps the hardest way of all. This is why I have labelled Hazel the Chief Clessie, or Wandering Rabbit. For this is the way of the commoner. The seemingly unremarkable rabbit who rises to the task at the right time and shows what they are made of by striking out and seeking to found an entirely new warren elsewhere. In some ways, of course, this was also the path that Woundwort followed when he founded Ephrafa. So what, other than the simple willingness to kill all who oppose you, was the difference between Woundwort and Hazel? It all seems to come down to basic motivation, to why at the most basic level you are seeking to establish another warren. Is it an act of fear, of hate, or of love? In human society, we seem to seek indications of understanding the commoner in our leaders, whether elected or not. In the Arthurian legends, for example, Arthur is not raised as a king, having to be hidden from his father's enemies. Despite his royal birth, he lives an ordinary life until the day he draws the sword from the stone. Thus his royal destiny is combined with an awareness of what it is to be, what? Ordinary? Poor? Able to understand the lives of most of those he will rule over? In other words, to understand the common people, having been one himself. In modern monarchies, this ideal is often reflected in admiration of ordinary qualities in those born to rule. For example, in the UK, our late Queen Elizabeth II was often praised for having been a military car mechanic in World War II. And of course, this ordinariness is built into the idea of a republic where any citizen can aspire to the highest office in the land, or of a head of government in a monarchy. For, unless we are to be ruled by simple fear, we seem to seek a combination of ordinariness and exceptionalism in our leaders, and these two seemingly contradictory qualities are supposed to exist side by side somehow, our leaders being judged by how well they manage to embody both in an eternal balancing act. Because only if we can see that they are seeking to do that can we trust that they are acting with the best motivations. Hazel surely embodies this quality of leadership ability concealed in just another rabbit. He was not the strongest, nor was he the most intelligent or the fastest. But he understood other rabbits, and he understood that to lead them he needed their unquestioning loyalty, motivated by the best of reasons rather than by the worst. For the brutal natural warrior Woundwort, the latter was the option he chose, after the trauma of his early life. Hazel, the ordinary rabbit, the commoner, did not have that option, nor would he have chosen it. This is his story. The portrayal of Hazel in the first half of the original novel. We first meet Hazel as he emerges to Silflay at Sandalford Warren with his brother Fiver. He is described as being a yearling and still below his full weight. However, he does not have the harassed look of most rank-and-file rabbits in their first year. Indeed, he has what is described as a shrewd, buoyant air. Fiver wants to move further from the warren as he is feeling uneasy and promptly finds a cowslip to eat. And immediately we are introduced to an element of the power dynamics in this warren, as two members of the Owsler remind them that cowslips are reserved for Owsler, implying a threat of violence when Hazel points out that Fiver found it. Hazel makes clear to Fiver what he thinks about what has just happened, and says he will treat Outskertus better if he gets into the Owsler. For Hazel, as he gets to full weight, will very much be Owsler material, as Fiver points out. He makes it clear he would never leave Fiver to look after himself, but that he has considered leaving this warren before now. Hazel clearly has issues with the way it is run. Before they move further off, Hazel checks with Fiver that it is safe. This is clearly a habit he has developed and foreshadows his talent for recognising the abilities of others. Crossing the valley, they find the notice board, and suddenly Fiver is feeling very different. Hazel deals efficiently with his brother's growing hysteria, getting him below ground despite his protests. But he is awoken in the night by Fiver having a dreadful nightmare. Having described the madness of his dream, Fiver says very clearly that a great danger is approaching the warren and that everyone needs to leave. Hazel, despite initial scepticism, knows well enough to take this seriously and does not hesitate to say that they need to tell the Chief Rabbit, though he does not expect to succeed in persuading him. They meet Bigwig outside Chief Rabbit or Threarar's burrow, who says he knows Hazel to be sensible. It is clear he has never asked to see the Chief Rabbit before. Hazel is polite but direct towards the Threarar, who does not appreciate being corrected about such things as names. He tries to lay out the facts and his experience of Fiver's abilities, but Fiver is too hysterical to come across well to the elderly chief, and ends up going into some kind of panic attack when the Threarar points out the practicalities of the entire warren leaving. They are dismissed. Hazel has done his best to warn the chief of a danger he clearly is convinced is genuine. So now this level-headed yearling has to decide what he is going to do. He discusses this with two of his friends, Blackberry and Dandelion. Their conversation is interrupted by Bigwig, who has left the Owsler after the Threarar's reaction to him introducing Hazel and Fiver. This was clearly already on the cards, and Bigwig speaks with Fiver to try to size him up. This ends with Bigwig asking if Fiver will be leaving, for Hazel is not the first after Fiver to mention doing so. But he does come to a firm decision as a result of this exchange. In what is arguably the first act of his leadership, Hazel declares that both he and Fiver will leave that night. He adds that they will accept anyone who wants to come with them. Bigwig immediately says he will join them. We are party to Hazel's thinking on this. Bigwig will be very useful, but might have a tendency to dominate, including be unwilling to take instructions from him. Hazel is already thinking like a leader. Bigwig says he will sound out the Owsler for discontented members, but Hazel urges caution. The Owsler will not want to lose useful rabbits. And so the scene is set for the departure, as the 11 rabbits gather that night, with Hazel turning up with Fiver and their small friend Pipkin. When Hawkbit turns up, Hazel reflects they can't pick and choose who comes with them, Hawkbit being a bit of a tedious character. And when Bigwig shows up with only Silver from the Owsler, Hazel is relieved. He knows that most who join them will be having a hard time of it, and he is determined that the smaller rabbits will not be given a hard time wherever they end up. And then Holly turns up with 2 guards to arrest Bigwig and Silver. After several of his companions attack them, led by Bigwig, getting the better of them in the process, Hazel tells them twice to leave or they will be killed. However, Bigwig has taken the lead twice now. The first time when he suggested leaving before Hazel had mentioned it, and now in using violence to defend the group. Or was it just to defend himself from arrest? Hazel, if his motivations are genuine, needs to start taking the lead more. But the trouble is that Bigwig is far more experienced than him in the kind of movement across country that he is about to try and lead. Hazel immediately agrees that they need to leave, going down to the stream and following its bank to stay together. Bigwig starts to give advice, but Hazel insists there isn't time. Once they reach the wood, which is already further than Hazel has ever been from the warren, Hazel decides to go straight into this alien environment without consulting Bigwig. Foolhardy or not, he has to start establishing his authority, though any mistakes he makes as a result will start to reduce trust in him. He also knows that they will be beyond risk of an Owsler pursuit once in the woods. Hazel sets an example by scouting ahead once they are in the alien environment of the trees. However, Fiver and Pipkin are soon exhausted from fear, and he takes Bigwig's advice to pause. He asks Dandelion to tell them a story, an excellent move in the circumstances. As the story ends, a Lendry or badger forces them to move off. Pipkin is limping badly, and then they come to Hazel's first major challenge as supposed leader, the River Enbourne. Bigwig openly questions Hazel's decision to take them into the wood. He is a rabbit who likes certainty, and Hazel's willingness to improvise and take risks is going to cause problems with Bigwig whenever they seem not to pay off. And then Fiver says they must cross the river, a ludicrous idea to Bigwig. Hawkbit helpfully suggests they should just go along the bank. Hazel spots some grass for Silflay and then has a private conversation with Fiver, who explains why they need to cross the river, and he makes total sense. Once crossed, the ground will start to climb again, which could lead them to the kind of higher ground they need for a new warren. Fiver clearly has a vision of what they should be looking for, and Hazel goes along with this. He insists they rest for a while. Blackberry helps deal with Bigwig by suggesting he swim the river to check out the riverbank, the first occasion where his intelligence comes in handy. However, when Bigwig spots the dog in the wood, they hit a real crisis. He says all that can swim should. Hazel says he will stay with Pipkin and Fiver, who are both too exhausted to swim, and this provokes the first real outburst from Bigwig. Hazel is reaching the end of his tether, and staying with the weakest rabbits is all that makes sense to him. Again, Blackberry saves the day by finding the piece of wood. Hazel has no idea what Blackberry means when he suggests using it, but Fiver does, and that's good enough. With Pipkin and Fiver on the piece of wood, pushed by Bigwig, they all cross the Enbourne. Hazel's first leadership challenge has been passed, with the help of others. As they rest on the other side, Hazel takes the lead as he scouts out the bean field, where they will be able to rest safely under the cover of the scent. As the group move to the bean field, Fiver and Pipkin are attacked by a crow. Hazel takes the lead in attacking it, running at the crow with no idea what to actually do. Fortunately, Bigwig and Silver join in, and Bigwig actually barges it away, putting it off the attack. Hazel clearly knows he must be seen to take the lead, even if others are more capable. The Enbourne has taught him this valuable lesson. Once they are among the beans, they rest properly for the first time, and Hazel, after deciding to set a watch, finds the thorn that has been crippling Pipkin. After resting, Hazel reassures Pipkin that he will not be left behind. Bigwig's willingness to do so at the Enbourne has scared him, but this allows Hazel to exemplify something better. Once they leave the bean field, Hazel has to defer to Bigwig as they encounter the road, which only he has any experience of. He learns the useful lesson of the lights of Fruidudil or cars at night and how they can turn you Tharn. This will be useful information later at Nuthanger Farm. Passing through Newtown Churchyard, they come to the Common, an alien environment as well for rabbits, especially at night. And this is where Hazel's leadership has its second challenge. By a bank that he is about to climb, Hazel is confronted by Hawkbit, Speedwell and Acorn, who think they should go back, pointing out that the going is just getting worse and worse and that Hazel clearly does not know where they are going. He begins to point out what will happen to them if they return after wounding an Owlsler officer. Hazel is clearly angry. Fiver and Bigwig rescue him. Bigwig by taking over the dressing down of the rebels, and Fiver by giving Hazel a gift, a definite goal for the place they need to reach. Climbing the bank he was about to, Fiver points out the downs in the far distance and explains why there would be such a good place for a warren. This seems too far for Hazel, who will be happy just to get across the common, but the seed is sown in his mind. But Fiver also speaks of a mist ahead of them, one in which they will be deceived. He goes into a trance-like state for a few moments, and Hazel seems not to have taken in the warning. For the greatest challenge yet to his still tenuous leadership lies just ahead of them. Bigwig has bitten Hawkbit for asking who the chief rabbit is. Blackberry asks Hazel the same question. Hazel replies that he doesn't know, but that Bigwig is the strongest. He clearly disapproves of the use of violence, and this exemplifies the difference of his attempted style of leadership and that which Bigwig is more used to. Hazel says that if they all follow him, he will have them out of this place by sunrise. There follows a difficult night during which they cross the rest of the common. Hazel is effectively leader only to Pipkin during that terrible night, his encouragements being as much for himself as the smaller rabbit. At last they reach the other side of the common, where Hazel sees the two Owlsler, Bigwig and Silver, made it across first. An excited Blackberry declares Hazel to be Hazel Ra, provoking Bigwig to declare that the day he calls Hazel that will be the day he stops fighting. This is a disappointing put-down for Hazel, and he feels it deeply. Well, unless you read an edition of Watership Down that doesn't include the lost paragraph, in which case Bigwig just says splendid when he sees the rest of them. The relief of crossing the common seems to unite the group, who would seemingly be happy to just settle here. Hazel, in his relief, seems to go along with this. It would be a brave chief indeed who suggested moving on again. Fiver keeps his counsel, but asks relevant questions of Bigwig regarding the lack of a lill and the proximity of a farm. Hazel decides to go along with the digging agenda, and perhaps this is understandable. And then Fiver spots a stranger, and everything changes. Hazel sensibly only takes Blackberry with him to meet the stranger, who is big and very healthy looking. He smells of good feeding and health, but seems melancholy. Something about this is very strange, and Hazel feels the need to say they can defend themselves. The stranger seems very relaxed about all of this, and asks to come and see the rest of the group. Hazel is made to look a bit foolish by this, as Bigwig directly questions the stranger. Fiver also has questions, and Hazel says that they have faced a lot of danger getting here. The stranger reveals his name is Cowslip, and says they are all welcome to join him at his warren. He seems unworried by all the things Hazel would expect to worry him. Hazel consults with the group as to whether they should visit Cowslip's warren. With the exception of Fiver, they all agree. Hazel is annoyed with his brother. Does he actually think he has got it wrong on this occasion, or is this just wishful thinking after an arduous journey? The fact that he quietly prays to Elachra that he is doing the right thing as they go to join the new warren might give us a clue. On joining the new warren, Hazel finds himself constantly surprised by its strangeness, from the dancing greeting they receive to the unexpectedly large great burrow, which causes him to panic for a moment. We see Hazel's ruthless side, as he has Pipkin immediately behind him as they enter the warren, both to make him feel included, but also because he can be spared if they are attacked. Bigwig he places at the rear to get as many away as possible if this happens. He immediately regrets this after entering the huge space of the great burrow. However, it becomes obvious there is no immediate threat here. Hazel soon relaxes and gets talking to a rabbit called Strawberry. He asks if Cowslip is Chief Rabbit, and is asked if he is. His response is diplomatic, that he doesn't know if his companions would want to hear him call that. Here there apparently is no chief, and no need of one. There are no ill, and their warren is large, so there is no need for digging. Strawberry talks a lot about his warren and introduces his doe, Nildro Hain. It seems to Hazel his talking is to avoid too many questions, but it reveals that there are many empty burrows here. Why is this? Strawberry shows Hazel a thing he calls a shape, which is basically stones pressed into a wall of earth that he says are Elachra. Evidently this was made some time ago and is revered. This is meaningless to Hazel. He begins to notice that any question he asks that starts with where is immediately interrupted. The last time this happens, Strawberry calls for someone into a burrow that is clearly unused. Returning to the great burrow, Hazel insists on talking to Blackberry outside in the rain. He is troubled. His insistence causes Cowslip to laugh, another alien phenomenon. Once outside with Blackberry and Pipkin, Hazel makes it clear he can see what is unnerving Fiver. Pipkin points out how sad they seem and how, despite their size, they do not seem like fighters. This small, perceptive rabbit might actually be useful. That night, Hazel dreams of Elachra tricking Strawberry so he can spend time with Nildro Hain, who he is clearly taken with. He awakes to the smell of a man outside the warren, yet he feels safe. And then there is stamping underground, a strange activity, as well as cries of Flayra, meaning food chief, or as we might say, the king of food. The kind of food grown by humans that usually has to be raided, but here it has been left by a man for the rabbits. His companions seem very happy with this, but Hazel starts to question Cowslip as to why the place is not full of rabbits. This does not get a positive reaction. Also, Fiver is missing, and Cowslip avoids answering any questions about this. He finds him under a yew tree and rapidly gets into an argument with his brother, who mocks the sight of rabbits carrying food. The Flayra has clearly made Hazel feel more positive about this place, despite his misgivings, and he tells Fiver he is wrong. In this story, that only ever has one result. Fiver says very clearly that this place frightens him, that the roof of the great burrow is made of bones. It becomes obvious that he has been above ground all night. This worries Hazel, but only because of wanting Fiver to be safe. Hazel consults Bigwig, and they scout together, finding a patch of disturbed earth by a burrow. But there is no smell except rabbit and human, both of which are everywhere. You might have thought this would all raise immediate alarm bells in the Owsler member, but apparently not. And they have both noticed that no one here tells you where anyone is. Bigwig helps Hazel to force Fiver underground, and that evening there is entertainment. These rabbits do not want to hear of their journey to this place, so Hazel, remembering the story referenced by the strange shape Strawberry showed him, suggests the story of the king's lettuce. But on Dandelion's finishing it, their hosts seem unimpressed. The tales of Elachra no longer mean much to them. Instead, Cowslip suggests a poem from a rabbit called Silverweed. Fiver asks Hazel to take him nearer to the poet as he speaks. The result is shocking, as Fiver reacts to the strange poem by almost clawing his way out of the great burrow. Fiver is ranting about what he has just heard, goes over Hazel's head, and Bigwig helps him force the small rabbit underground again. That night, Hazel has another dream, of Bigwig carrying yew berries, which are poisonous, back to the warren. He awakes to Fiver gone again. He and Bigwig find Fiver leaving for the hills. When Hazel decides on a gentler approach with Fiver, offering to go a little way with him, Bigwig loses his temper with Fiver, during which he calls Hazel one of the best rabbits in the group, who Fiver is putting at risk. Having finished with Fiver, he runs off into a hedge and is snared. Hazel immediately goes into leader mode, asking Bigwig what to do, as he is most likely to know, then telling Fiver to fetch Blackberry and Silver in particular, in other words, Brains and Owsler. Pipkin arrives and says that Cowslip told Fiver to stop talking about it. This is shocking. Bigwig's few words were that they had to dig out the peg. Blackberry works out what this means, and Hazel starts digging at it. As the hole gets tighter, Blackberry tells Pipkin to go in, then Hazel sends in Fiver. The peg is dug through. But it is too late. Bigwig is dead. Hazel immediately realises he has to get them all away fast. He quotes the rabbit proverb used at a death to Blackberry and begs him to help. Then he distracts them all by having a go at Pipkin for his appearance and Fiver, who he asks about what happened with Cowslip. The news that he attacked Fiver for mentioning the snare provokes the first words from the reviving bigwig that he will kill Cowslip. The others join in with this rage, intending to attack the warren. For a while Hazel is no leader, and then Fiver swears loudly and tells the horrific tale of the warren of the snares. Fiver is in charge for the moment, saying they must go, now. Hazel assumes the mantle again, saying they will go to the hills. Then they see Strawberry running towards them, terrified. It becomes clear Nildro Hayne has also been snared. Hazel, in a moment of compassion, invites him to join them over the objections of Silver. And they all leave for the hills. And so Hazel's leadership passes its first phase. He is a risk-taker who knows how to communicate with and persuade others. These are his exceptional qualities. And he trusts in others to do or think the things he cannot. This is his ordinary quality. But while under stress, he is capable of making poor judgments. Unfortunately, his leadership thus far has been tenuous, so he has felt pressure to cave into the feelings of the group at times, not daring to flex his extraordinary qualities too far. However, Fiver being proven right about the warren of the snares changes things. The group becomes far more cohesive, journeying for another day, surviving a rat attack in a barn and arriving at the foot of Watership Down. They now know they need each other, and Hazel's authority is respected. This is now less a story about how to persuade others to do what he wants, and more a story of what he asks or tells others to do. Fiver has made it clear that they should climb the down, but Hazel insists on leading a scouting party first. On the way up the slope, Hazel prays to Frith that Fiver was right. He, Dandelion and Hawkbit reach the summit, which is all that Fiver promised, and Hazel calls him Fiver Ra. On the way back, they seem to lose Hawkbit, but his discovery of some old burrows halfway up the slope is a stroke of luck that probably saves lives. With time to rest, Blackberry lays out some revolutionary ideas to Hazel about Buck's digging, more specifically digging at the top of the down. Hazel plays this cautiously, casually suggesting they all go and check the wood at the summit, where Hazel initiates the digging at the northeast corner of the beach hanger. After a while, Hazel suggests a group of them silflay at the foot of the hill, where he suggests to Bigwig that they try digging a great burrow in their new hilltop warren. They are interrupted by a stamped alarm and take refuge in a ditch. Hazel cuts through Bigwig's superstition as he thinks what is approaching is the Black Rabbit of Inlay, and discovers Captain Holly of the Sandalford Owsler in a dreadful state, as well as the Owsler member Bluebell. Hazel has the two rabbits taken to the rough holes on the slope to rest. He sends word no one else should come down the hill, which Pipkin disobeys out of his kind of loyalty. Bigwig recognises Hazel went ahead of him when they didn't know what they were facing. And he is no longer doing this kind of thing to assert authority. It is natural for him. Back at the summit, Hazel inspects progress with the new warren, in particular the new great burrow which Strawberry is in charge of, which comes to be known as the honeycomb. He also rescues a mouse from a hawk. This turns out to have been a very good idea and begins the notion of working with other non-Elil. Hazel speaks with Holly, who is recovering. Holly is impressed with what Hazel has achieved and assures him he will not cause any trouble. Holly and Bluebell's horrific account of the destruction of Sandalford settles once and for all that Hazel made the right decision in leaving. He intervenes on a couple of occasions when the details are too unbearable to hear, where an egotistical leader would have relished his followers hearing such things. As Hazel attends to Holly's injured ear, he explains his idea about cooperation with other creatures to Silver, and another mouse recommending a good patch of grass nearby immediately demonstrates what a good idea this can be. This leads to the telling of the relevant story of the trial of Elachera. All of this foreshadows the arrival of Kihar on Watership Down, the potential of whom Hazel realises immediately. He persuades his companions to find worms and insects for the injured seagull. When Kihar gets angry, he tells them not to feed him for a while. This is Hazel at his most ruthless. At this point he is thinking of Kihar purely in the most practical terms, as a potential means for them to address the issue that will dominate the remainder of the story. The dough problem. Hazel offers the weaker Kihar sanctuary at the new warren. He harshly cut short any reactions to the arrival of Kihar by ordering the gathering of more food for him and the digging of a new bay at the opening of one of the runs. Bigwig, who has been sceptical, supports him in this, and this leads to his friendship with Kihar. Later, Hazel explains his thinking. His idea is that Kihar will search out any warrens in the surrounding area where there might be does who could join them on the down. But he asks Bigwig to talk to Kihar in a way that will persuade him to come up with this idea himself. The logic seems to be that if the bird is not inclined towards such an idea, there will be no point in asking him. Bigwig succeeds, and with his injured wing recovered, Kihar sets off to carry out a plan that, if it succeeds, will be El Achrera-like in its genius. Kihar eventually returns with news of two locations: the hutch rabbits at Nuthanger Farm nearby, and a large warren much further off to the south. Hazel decides to send an embassy to this warren of 4 rabbits. He selects Holly to lead this party, along with Silver, Buckthorn and Strawberry, who is now fully integrated into the group. And now comes what is perhaps the low point of Hazel's leadership in the original story, as a spirit of happy mischief enters him. He has the notion of the embassy returning to find does already on the down, rescued from the hutches at Nuthanger Farm. But why? This is an uncharacteristic moment of ego for Hazel, however he might dress it up. And it is nearly the end of him. His selection of Pipkin to accompany him on his initial foray is sound. On the way, a rat gives them directions, Hazel's manner somehow encouraging friendliness. This scouting expedition is very useful, if you accept this plan is going ahead. They discover the tied-up dog, the location of the hutch, the fact there are 2 does and 2 bucks in it, and the presence of at least 1 cat. Before having to run away from this cat with Pipkin, Hazel is able to speak with the hutch rabbits about his plan and about why they should go along with it. One of them, Clover, is particularly keen. And to be fair to Hazel, she will later bear the first litter of rabbit kittens on Watership Down. Hazel cleverly gets them both away from the cat by taunting it first so that it expends its energy in leaping at them. But where did he gain this knowledge during his limited life at Sandalford? In any event, the actual raid on Nuthanger Farm goes ahead. Bigwig is keen to fight cats, but Fiver has misgivings and has a go at Hazel for showing off for little potential gain. Hazel tells him to be quiet. He really should know better by now. Bigwig selects Dandelion, Speedwell and Hawkbit to join them on the raid, and Fiver persuades Hazel to offer not to enter the farmyard itself during the raid. His feeling of misgiving centres on Hazel himself. Is he sensing a bit too much ego in him, as in the kind that can get you killed? Hazel dutifully waits outside the farmyard, and when 2 of the hutch rabbits arrive where he is waiting, he praises his companions for having fought the cats off. But the other 2 hutch rabbits, one of them a doe, have not arrived. So Hazel gives Bigwig the job of getting Clover and Boxwood back to the warren, while he and Dandelion go into the farmyard to persuade the other 2 to come along. This is a brave move by Hazel, and it succeeds in his persuading the doe Haystack to come along with them, though the buck Laurel has to be left behind. Being a buck, he is of limited use to them anyway, and Hazel says as much to Dandelion. But as they are there, in the exact place Hazel promised Fiver he would not enter, the humans arrive back in their crudoodoo. The 3 rabbits end up trapped in a blocked ditch. Hazel says he will run across the lane to distract the men so that Dandelion and Haystack can get away. He does this, and is shot in his hind leg. He had not realised the men had a gun. Desperately, Hazel drags himself out of sight into a land drain, where he collapses in pain. And so Hazel, the ordinary rabbit who became a Chlessie, the Chlessie who became a chief, the chief who founded a new warren in an ideal location and became an innovator to match El Achrera, has pushed himself a step too far, it seems. By allowing himself a moment of pride, wanting to be seen to have got some does by the time Holly's embassy returns from the large warren to the south, he has pushed his luck too far, as well as ignoring Fiver's advice, which he should have known not to do. But then again, El Achrera also made mistakes in his time, according to the stories. Stealing the king's lettuce eventually resulted in such a serious crisis that he was forced to go and see the Black Rabbit of Inlay himself to find an answer. And, as things stand, it looks as if Hazel might be paying him a visit soon himself. Next time, having deliberately paused on a cliffhanger, we look at the portrayal of Hazel in the remainder of the book.